They said Sparta was finished. They said Thermopylae had broken the heart of Greece, but they were wrong. From the ashes of Leonidas and his 300 rose an army of vengeance, 10,000 Spartans forged by grief, wrath, and unyielding honor. When Persia thought Greece would kneel forever, Sparta sharpened its sword one last time. This is the forgotten war, the final reckoning that brought the might of Xerxes to its knees. The wind howled across the pass of Thermopylae, carrying the echoes of the fallen. Burned shields, shattered spears, and blood-soaked earth marked where 300 Spartans and their allies had defied the impossible. Years had passed, but for Sparta the wound was fresh, a scar on the soul of a nation that lived for war. Mothers whispered the names of their dead sons as boys trained twice as hard, dreaming of vengeance. In the smoky halls of Sparta, the ephors and generals spoke not of defeat, but of memory. The loss of Leonidas was not an end. It was a vow written in blood. Every Spartan youth knew the story by heart, how their king fought to his last breath, surrounded, betrayed, but unbroken. That memory burned brighter than any flame in Greece. Across the Aegean, Persia grew arrogant. Xerxes built new temples and celebrated the conquest of Greece, believing the fire had gone out. But in Sparta's mountains, men hammered bronze and sharpened steel. They did not mourn, they prepared. In the great palace of Persepolis, Xerxes, the king of kings, ruled over the largest empire the world had ever seen. From India to Egypt, his banners flew over millions. Yet even in his glory, he feared one name, Sparta. The ghost of Leonidas haunted his sleep, the memory of that narrow pass where 300 had slain thousands. His advisors begged him to forget Greece, to turn his gaze eastward, but pride is a cruel master. Xerxes could not rest, knowing a handful of warriors had defied him. So he sent his satraps west, rebuilding the Persian fleet and raising new armies. He wanted to remind the world that Persia bows to no one. But the world was changing. Greece had not fallen apart. It had united. Themistocles rebuilt Athens' navy, and Sparta gathered allies under its black banners. For the first time since Thermopylae, the Hellenic League was reborn, and vengeance marched with them. In Sparta, every sword was named for a ghost. Fathers handed down shields with bloodstains that had never been washed. The new generation, born after Thermopylae, had grown up under the shadow of sacrifice. When the call came for war, 10,000 answered without hesitation. They trained from dawn until dusk, their bronze armor gleaming beneath the Peloponnesian sun. No man spoke of glory, they spoke only of duty. They remembered the cries of the 300 who had died holding the pass, and they swore the Persians would pay in kind. Messengers ran through Greece, gathering allies from Corinth, Megara, and Arcadia. Some came for freedom, others for revenge, but all bowed before the crimson cloaks of Sparta, whose soldiers moved like living statues of war. The time for mourning had ended. The time for reckoning had begun. As the sun rose over the Eurotas River, the 10,000 began their march. The ground trembled beneath their feet, bronze greaves striking in rhythm, shields clashing like thunder. Behind them, the women of Sparta sang ancient hymns, not of sorrow but of honor. At Aegina, the fleet of Athens awaited. Hundreds of triremes lined like wolves across the sea. The alliance was uneasy as Sparta's warriors mistrusted Athenian pride, but vengeance united even old enemies. Themistocles himself saluted the Spartan commanders, promising to strike Persia's heart while the Spartans cut off its limbs. The gods, it seemed, had chosen Greece once more. But as they crossed the Aegean, dark omens filled the sky, storms that tore sails, whispers of betrayal, and Persian spies lurking in every port. The ghosts of Thermopylae watched, waiting to see if this new army was worthy of their legacy. Xerxes had learned from his failures. When the Greeks landed on Asia Minor, they found the Persian army waiting, not disorganized, but prepared. The plains of Sardis had been turned into a killing field, lined with archers, cavalry, and fire traps. The King of Kings had turned vengeance into bait. The first days were chaos. Greek scouts were ambushed, supply lines cut, and morale shaken. But Spartans did not break, they adapted. Under General Pausanias, Leonidas' nephew, they used the terrain as their ancestor had. They dug trenches, feigned retreats, and drew the Persians into close combat where discipline decided fate. By nightfall, the battlefield was silent except for the crackle of burning tents. Thousands of Persians lay dead, their banners trampled in the mud. The first victory was won, not for conquest, but for Thermopylae. Ephesus, jewel of the Ionian coast, became the next target. Once Greek, now Persian, its walls were tall and its defenders proud. The 10,000 Spartans surrounded it with precision, building siege towers and cutting off the city's water supply. Inside, the Persians believed they could outlast the siege, but they did not understand Spartan patience. For 40 days, the city starved. Then, on the 41st, the Spartans attacked, not with rage, but with cold, calculated fury. They breached the gates at dawn. What followed was no battle, it was execution. When the smoke cleared, Spartan banners flew from the Acropolis, and the city's surviving Greeks wept in freedom. The war of vengeance had become a crusade of liberation. News of Ephesus reached Xerxes like a dagger to the heart. His generals trembled as the King of Kings rose from his throne, eyes burning with humiliation. He ordered a counterattack, not a mere army, but an empire's wrath. Hundreds of thousands of Persians gathered under the blazing sun. Elite immortals, cavalry from Bactria, archers from Scythia, all united under one command. They would march west and crush the Greeks once and for all. But among his court, whispers spread of omens and prophecies. The oracle of Babylon had warned, "Beware the sons of the wolf, for they carry the vengeance of gods." Xerxes laughed, but deep inside, fear began to coil like a serpent. The two armies met at the River Hermus. The land trembled beneath their approach. For miles, the Persian lines stretched, endless ranks of men and horses, banners fluttering like fire. Opposite them, only 10,000 Spartans stood, their red cloaks a bloodstain on the horizon. When the trumpets sounded, arrows darkened the sky. Shields locked, spears rose, and the Spartans advanced like a bronze wall. Wave after wave of Persians broke against them, screaming, dying, drowning in their own blood. By nightfall, the river ran red. For every Spartan who fell, 10 Persians died. When dawn came, the Spartans were still standing, silent, unbroken, and unafraid. The ghosts of Thermopylae smiled that day. Pausanias, nephew of Leonidas, became a legend in that battle. He fought with the calm fury of his uncle, leading from the front, his spear cutting down enemies like wheat. To the soldiers, he was not merely a general, he was the living memory of Thermopylae. He ordered the Persian dead buried without dishonor, for Spartans respected courage even in their foes. This mercy earned him the name the Just. Yet in his heart, he carried the same fire that had burned in Leonidas, vengeance unfulfilled until Persia was humbled. Under his command, the 10,000 marched deeper into Asia, liberating cities and gathering Greek exiles. Each victory swelled their ranks and their purpose. The legend of the Avengers of Thermopylae began to spread, reaching even the ears of the gods. Sardis, capital of the Persian West, stood like a mountain of marble and gold. Its walls were thought unbreakable, guarded by thousands, and blessed by Xerxes himself. But Pausanias had studied its defenses well. The attack came in silence. Spartan climbers scaled the cliffs at night, unseen by sentries. When dawn rose, fire erupted across the city. The Spartans stormed the gates and chaos reigned. Persian soldiers fought bravely, but fear spread faster than steel. By sunset, Sardis burned. The Persians fled east, and Greek banners flew from the citadel. The victory sent shockwaves across the empire. For the first time, Persia bled in its own land. Winter came harsh and merciless. Snow blanketed the mountains, and the Spartan army faced hunger and exhaustion. Many died not by sword, but by cold. Yet no one turned back. They hunted, foraged, and endured, for they remembered their ancestors who had stood at Thermopylae without food or hope. Around their fires, the Spartans spoke of Leonidas as if he still marched beside them. "We are his vengeance," they whispered. "We are his echo." Even the youngest recruits stood taller, their eyes hard as the frost. When spring broke, the army emerged leaner, stronger, and angrier. They were no longer just soldiers. They were instruments of divine retribution. Xerxes finally met them near the plains of Phrygia. The King of Kings himself rode at the head of his army, a sea of men stretching beyond the horizon. Trumpets roared, drums thundered. It was the largest army Greece had ever faced. The Spartans stood silent, shields raised, their breath steady. Pausanias raised his spear, his voice calm. "This is for Leonidas." The lines clashed, bronze met iron, and the earth shook. The Persians attacked in waves, but discipline triumphed over chaos. The immortals broke first, their confidence shattered. When Xerxes saw his elite guard flee, he realized what Leonidas had meant when he said, "Come and take them." As the sun set over the blood-soaked fields, Xerxes' chariot overturned. Surrounded, he fled with a handful of guards, his empire crumbling behind him. The Spartans did not chase. Vengeance was already complete. They found Xerxes' crown among the corpses, trampled into the mud. Pausanias lifted it and placed it on a broken spear, not as a trophy, but as a warning. "No man who mocks Sparta will wear this again," he said. When the battle ended, silence reigned. The final war had ended as it began, with courage, sacrifice, and defiance. Years later, the survivors returned home. They were fewer, older, but unbowed. The women of Sparta lined the streets, not to weep, but to honor. Each scar was a story, each limp a victory. The names of the fallen were carved into stone beside Leonidas. The tale of Thermopylae had a new ending, one written in vengeance and victory. The 10,000 had not just avenged their king, they had restored Sparta's soul. As the sun dipped below Taygetus, the people of Sparta whispered a single truth: they were worthy. Centuries later, poets still sang of the 10,000, not as conquerors, but as men who answered a promise. Their legend became myth, and their myth became history. Every warrior who marched under Sparta's crimson banner carried that legacy, the vow that no defeat would go unanswered. From Thermopylae to Phrygia, the echo of their footsteps lingered like thunder across time. And in the ruins of old Persia, travelers still spoke of them, the sons of the wolf, the ghosts of vengeance, the army that made gods tremble. History remembers the 300, but it was the 10,000 who finished what Leonidas began. They did not fight for glory or conquest, but for memory, the unbreakable bond between honor and revenge. In their silence they spoke louder than kings. In their sacrifice they taught the world one eternal truth: Sparta never dies,